Good day, everyone. My name is LJ Stambuk. I'm the president and CEO of the World Affairs Council of Charlotte. It is a wonderful day here in Charlotte. It is raining a little bit, but we believe that better weather is coming up next week. So we are all in a great mood, and we have the distinct pleasure of having with us from London, England, Mohit Joshi, the president of Infosys, and he is going to speak in the World Affairs Council Distinguished Speaker Series today on the role of technology in the post-pandemic recovery of the global financial system. We're delighted to have you here with us, Joshi. Your team here in Charlotte is excellent, and we enjoy working with them. I would like to mention to you all Neeraj Jindal and Jay Nar, who are our partners and are the leading executives here in Charlotte. They've been instrumental in helping us put together today's event. And I would also like to mention someone we just met, one of your team, Mohit, that helped us so much, Amit Vasudeva, and everyone else there in London who helped work with us on making this event possible today. The World Affairs Council Charlotte is the community's premier global education nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We have always sought to bring the world closer to you and to build a community of internationally informed and engaged citizens. Dialogue, knowledge, active participation, and understanding of global issues are vitally important for our democracy to flourish at all levels. I will go into some housekeeping points here. Your microphone will be on mute and your camera turned off for the duration of the presentation. However, we invite you to submit questions, and you can do it anytime during this program. Please use the question and answer box in the Zoom toolbar below. You can see it circled in red. If you send your question to the chat box, it might not get into the question and answer queue. So please send it to the question and answer box that you see circled here. Finally, this presentation will be recorded and shared widely. So please make sure that you are on the World Affairs Council mailing list and make sure that you do receive our emails, because we would like to share this presentation with you as well. If you are registered to participate in the World Affairs Council networking reception after today's program, please stay on the Zoom call once the presentation has ended. It will last for about 30 minutes, and Mohit has agreed to stay with us kindly, and I appreciate that very much. Our staff will enable your microphone and camera access, which we ask that you please turn on to participate. We would like to see you and hear you, so please turn on your microphone and camera access once we get into the networking reception after today's program. Finally, programs coming up. Tonight, we're partnering with the Charlotte Sister Cities Spotlight Forum with Limoges, France. On February 25th, 2021, we will have the World Affairs Council Distinguished Speaker Series with Dr. Michael Marcicano, President and CEO of the Foundation for the Carolinas. They have been doing great work during this global pandemic to see our city and region come through on the positive side of this whole very challenging times. And then on March 3, 2021, the World Affairs Council and Bank of America International Women's Day program with Savita Subramanian. She is the Managing Director and Head of U.S. Equity and Quantitative Strategy at Bank of America. Once again, we're celebrating International Women's Day, and we have a program together in partnership with Bank of America with Savita Subramanian. Please join us on March 3rd for this program. And we are proud to continue serving this community. And please do know that we're very thankful for your support. And we will ask you to consider possibly making a contribution in order to help us sustain our vital place in Charlotte's civic landscape, as this is the only support we receive, financial support, is from you, our members, individual and corporates. So if you have the opportunity and can, please donate. $1 would be great. More would be even better. And if you're not, please do become a World Affairs Council member. Appreciate your support. And we are on all of the social media channels. Please join us. We would love to have you join us on these channels as we go forward into 2021. Before I go to the background and biography of Mohit Joshi, I would like to also use this opportunity to thank our board members. The World Affairs Council board members do a great job. The reason we're here today and that we're sustaining and actually doing extremely well during these, as I said, very challenging global times is thanks to the leadership of our board members. And I believe we have a large number of World Affairs Council board members with us today. Thank you for your leadership. Mohit Joshi is the president of Infosys Limited. He heads the financial services, healthcare, and life sciences business globally and is the chairman of Edgeworth Systems, the software subsidiary of Infosys. Mohit joined Infosys in 2000 and has since worked in different capacities for the firm. In his previous role, he was responsible for leading the financial services businesses in Europe. In 2007, Mohit was appointed the CEO of Infosys Mexico and was instrumental in setting up the first subsidiary in Latin America. He holds an MBA from the Faculty of Management Studies, Delhi University, and a bachelor's degree in history from St. Stephen's College, Delhi. Mohit was invited to join the Global Young Leader Program at the World Economic Forum in 2014. He is the vice chair of the Economic Growth Board of the Confederation of British Industry and is a member of Young Presidents Organization. Mohit lives with his wife and 2 daughters in London. Mohit has lived and worked in 3 continents across Asia, Europe, and North America, and this informs his work and career. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you Mohit Joshi. Mohit.
Thank you so much, LJ. And I guess we're going to start off with a brief video.
You don't show it here, just show it here. Register the show it.
Hey guys, MC here.
MC.
Sorry, my agent's a bit slow.
Well, thank you so much, LJ. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak with the World Affairs Council of Charlotte. As LJ mentioned, I'm based here in London, the historic banking capital of the world, and with Charlotte, the new banking capital of the world. It's a real privilege to be speaking to all of you. As you may know, at Infosys, we've had a very long and storied presence in Charlotte. It's one of our biggest centers in the world, and we've got over 750 people working there locally, working with many large organizations there. So it's it's with great pleasure and pride that I accepted this invitation to speak to you. And I really want to speak to you about a sector which is just so critical to Charlotte's economy, which is the financial services industry, and really about how there is an opportunity using technology for the financial services industry to take a lead in the recovery of the economy post the pandemic. So these are some of the topics that I'll be speaking to you about today. But let me just start off by giving you a quick introduction to Infosys for those of you who have not worked with us. The company itself, Infosys, was founded back in 1981 by a group of 7 software engineers. And now we're truly a multinational corporation with presence in over 50 countries. Obviously, our largest market is the US. The company is now 250,000 people strong, and we generate about $13 billion worth of revenue annually. We're listed on the New York Stock Exchange and the Bombay Stock Exchange. Uh, just a little bit about the strategy of the company. Our strategy has five main pillars to it. The first is helping our clients become, scalable or scaled agile digital businesses, and we've tried to define, digital very specifically in terms of experience, in terms of data or insight, in terms of innovation, which goes to IoT and vertical platforms, in terms of accelerating the move to the cloud economy, and finally, in terms of of assurance, which is cybersecurity. So digital is the first and most important pillar of our strategy. The second is helping our clients transform their core legacy systems using AI and automation, and especially in the financial services business. Legacy is a very core part of the existing technology landscape. So these are our two market-facing strategies. To allow us to deliver on this, we're very focused on transforming the workforce, and learning is a huge imperative for us, as I'll talk about later in the presentation. As a company, historically, we've invested between 2 to 3% of our top line on training our employees, and increasingly, we're also working to train the employees of our clients. We're also very focused on localization, so expanding aggressively in our key markets. In the US, over the past 3 years, we've hired over 17,000 people, and the intention is to hire an additional 8 to 10,000 people over the next few years. So about 25,000 people over a 5-year period. And this localization journey is going on in other parts of the world as well, including in Europe, in the Asia Pacific region. And we're also very focused as a very purpose-driven company on our ESG agenda, and especially on the environmental goals. Infosys has done extremely well. Very proud of our track record in being among the first carbon neutral companies. So in 2020, Infosys is already carbon neutral across scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. Very focused on our social agenda, which goes towards our ambition to give 10 million people across the world digital skills, and very focused on our governance agenda, which is, among other things, is very focused on increasing the representation of women in our workforce. As a company, 36% of our employees are already women, but we want to make sure that at the leadership level and overall, we come closer to a 50-50 representation. We're one of the top employers globally, recognized by the Top Employer Foundation. And the one thing I'm very proud of is last year, Forbes magazine ranked us as among the 3 best regarded companies in the world. So this is not on any specific metric. This is overall across financial performance, how our employees and our clients regard us, and across a range of ESG metrics. So this, in a snapshot, is Infosys. Just moving a little bit about, how have we fared in the post-pandemic, world. And again, like many of you, or like many of us, the transition to the, is still not the post-pandemic world, but, when the pandemic first hit us, or when we first realized the severity of the impact in the second half of March of last year, I think we were caught equally by surprise, but we were able to make a transition very quickly to working from home. So just within a couple of weeks, we had 90% of our employees working from home. And today is still 95% plus of our employees are working from home. At the start of the pandemic, given our business, and our business is really technology services, software, and and the platforms business in which we work. Our business is very critical to our clients. If I take Europe as an example, in one of our subsidiaries, we service over $330 billion worth of mortgages. We process, hundreds of billions of dollars of transactions every day. We've got a very deep presence with several tech companies supporting their vast estates. And so resilience is very important for us. And I'm really proud of the fact that we were able to move to stability, almost instantaneously. Over time, we've been able to, again, refine the infrastructure that we have on working from home. We've been able to obviously grow as a company through the crisis. Again, when the crisis first hit us, and we were not able to give a very clear guidance to the street on what we expected growth to be. And indeed, I think the market expected our revenues to drop by 10 to 15%. That was the expectation. But instead, we've been able to increase our guidance in every single quarter, and we're projecting 4.5 to 5% growth for the financial year. Our financial year ends on the 31st of March. So we've been able to, to maintain our equilibrium and our growth through the crisis, and obviously support our clients and our employees. In a sense, and we'll talk about this in the course of the conversation. We feel that this new mode of working, this remote mode of working, and possibly transitioning to a hybrid mode of working is here to stay. And we've made several investments from a security perspective, from an employee wellness perspective, from an infrastructure perspective, and from a platform perspective to enable this transition, to this new working environment. And it does have several benefits, right? It has benefits in terms of cost, it has benefits in terms of employee productivity, and it has benefits for the environment. So this is just a snapshot on how we performed as a company through the crisis. Moving on now to the meat of the presentation, right, which is about how do I see the financial services sector being impacted by the crisis? What do I see as the key levers for growth and for productivity for the sector? And I think the comparison with the financial crisis is somewhat relevant, though at times quite misleading. If you take your sort of imagination back to the post 2009 era, banks and insurers and large financial institutions were in a sense seen as somewhat culpable for the crisis, and they were held responsible for what had happened to the global economy. And I think part of the blame game or the shaming was completely uncalled for, but that is the reality. I remember actually speaking with a friend of mine who was a very senior banker at HSBC, and she told me that in social settings she'd stopped referring to herself as a banker and called herself a social entrepreneur. But if we look at the current environment, I feel that that banks and insurers and asset managers have a real opportunity to lead the response to the crisis, to lead this recovery, to enable individuals and businesses and economies and countries to build back better. At the end of the day, this crisis has impacted small businesses, overwhelmingly, and with banks being able to lend and insurers being able to offer protection is going to be a very significant piece of the recovery. A lot of the recovery and a lot of the intervention from the banking side will have to be driven through technology. And the challenge for the financial institutions is going to be, I think, broadly threefold, right? First is that there will be a cost challenge because interest rates are low, and this obviously has an impact on the income line. There will also be potentially loan losses, and you're seeing this with the huge amounts of provisions being made, by banks and insurers. So loan losses will continue to be a drag. And equally, consumer expectations have changed dramatically. I think, there's this very famous saying from Lenin that there are decades where nothing happens, and then there are weeks where decades happen. And I think this is the transition that we've seen. Customers are going to be a lot more picky about digital-only experiences. The competition from fintechs and from new players is going to increase. And so I think the industry broadly faces three imperatives. The first is the digital imperative or the experience imperative. The second is a cost challenge. How do organizations operationally become more efficient and become more industrialized? And finally, how do organizations transform themselves, from the ways in which they work, from the ways in which they relate to society and, to their employees and to their clients. So these are the three broad challenges for the sector. And indeed, in a large part, this challenge is true for the broader economy as well. The challenge of becoming more digital, the challenge of becoming more industrialized, and being able to transform our organizations while we're going through the digital and the cost challenges. So let's begin by taking a look at the experience or the digital challenge. I think it's it's very clear that consumer behaviors have been changing for the past couple of decades, but this move has really accelerated over since the pandemic has hit us. And I'll just give you, a small example of this, right? If you think of the ways in which we work, historically, a lot of the work that we do as a company has been in secure development centers. And in some cases, there were severe restrictions on what employees could access and could not access. And suddenly, you have everybody working from home. You have, consumers being able to access only your web storefront. This has meant in certain cases that volumes have gone up dramatically. I was speaking with a large UK bank over here, and if you look at mortgage resets or requests from customers for mortgage resets, typical volume 400 requests a day, new volume 40,000 a day. So at the same time as volumes are spiking, customers are engaging with you largely through a digital channel. There is the ongoing challenge of big techs and fintechs providing differentiated experiences. I feel that about a decade ago, a lot of banks and insurers were concerned about Apple becoming a bank or Google becoming a bank. And I feel that fear has now gone away because large tech does not want to become a bank. They'd rather become gatekeepers. But at the same time, there is a challenge from the new and emerging fintech that are targeting very attractive pieces of the banking business or the insurance business. The regulators have been pushing competition, and we've seen this, in Europe with open banking and GDPR, and you're seeing this in the US as well. The desire of the regulator to make the market more attractive to external participants, and from a consumer perspective as well, there's been a huge focus on sustainability. Uh, Clients and consumers are now very focused on whether the financial institution they work with is focused on the same goals as they are. With interest rates being low, there's also been a focus on looking at other streams of income. So this is the digital challenge that organizations are facing. And this digital challenge can largely only be addressed through technology. Part of it is combining the physical and the digital together. I believe that the digital piece, which in many cases the branch network, will continue to remain really relevant. But how do you make it like a smarter branch? How do you make sure that you're able to inject elements of technology within the branch to make it more effective? From a data perspective, we have masses of data. From personalization, how do we move towards being able to monetize data? And I must say that this is a challenge in which almost every bank has failed, right? An insurer has failed. There have been billions, hundreds of millions invested in on the data landscape, but it's proven harder to monetize than it has been for the large tech companies. I feel that digital identity is going to be a huge opportunity for the future. From my personal perspective, I took on a new mortgage in April of last year, and I was shocked that I was able to do everything digitally using a digital ID. In India, we've seen the introduction of Aadhaar, which is a digital identity for all 1.2 billion citizens, and the remarkable transformation it has driven in financial services. There will be digital identity in the future in every country in the world. It will either be provided by governments or by big tech or by financial institutions. And I feel this is the opportunity for financial institutions across the globe to embrace digital ID and then really be at the center of a customer's financial life. We've seen customer journeys being a huge area of focus, a huge focus on simplification, rationalization, making consumer journeys much more intuitive, and we think this trend will continue. At the same time, there's also, historically, financial institutions have been, front to back completely owned, right? They really haven't played very much with ecosystem participants, but now it's all about the ecosystem. And if you look at certain markets where we work, like we do a lot of work in China and India, and you've seen with the rise of the super apps, whether it's the WeChat family or it's the Paytm family, you can use the super app to do everything. You can use the super app for payments, for wealth management, for booking travel tickets, for ordering food, for courier services, for paying for topping up your phone. So the rise of super apps will also challenge financial institutions. Again, the digital agenda is very important. It is critical in almost all boardrooms that are thinking about the transformation of their organizations. And the digital challenge can only be met through technology. So this is the first part of the challenge, which is around experience and digital. The second challenge and opportunity for banks and for insurers is to dramatically reshape their cost structures. In most of Western Europe and in the US, we see cost to income ratios still between 50 to 80% for most banks. If we look at DBS, which is a very large client of ours, if you look at DBS in Asia, many of their subsidiaries are working on 20 to 30% cost to income ratios. For digital banks, cost to income ratios are dramatically different, and I think uh, the challenge of dealing with cost to income ratios while income streams are shrinking is going to be an important challenge. Uh, I'd spoken about legacy earlier. A lot of our core banking systems still, trace their history back to the 70s and the 80s. These will need to be either replaced or potentially the intelligence will need to be stripped out and they will need to be surrounded by a core of new technology. There's also a huge focus that the regulator has on operational resilience. So how do we make sure that organizations are able to map the core services that they provide to their clients, and then be able to identify potential risks and how they will respond to the risks. So essentially the operational challenge goes to cost and resilience. And again, over here, using new technology, using automation and AI, and looking at resiliency using design thinking parameters, creating digital twins are all very significant technology responses to making the organization much more cost efficient. I think the digital and the cost imperatives almost go hand in hand. Any investments made in digital to simplify customer journeys, to allow for more straight through processing, will translate into cost benefits as well. And a lot of these digital initiatives can therefore pay for themselves because you're making the landscape a lot more simpler and a lot more intuitive. So that's the operational imperatives from a financial services perspective. And finally, we come to the organizational imperative, right? In the aftermath of the financial crisis, we saw a huge focus on the risk agenda, on the risk and regulatory agenda. How do we make sure that we're building out a stronger risk culture within our financial institutions, and that will remain. But equally, there is a desire to, we spoke about the fact that working more flexibly and remotely is a key ask we see pretty much across the world. And I don't know if this resonates with you, but we hear a lot of talk about a lot of employees wanting to come back to the office. I feel that there will be a huge resistance to getting back employees to the office for 5 days a week. I think that is behind us now. We have to learn to work in a hybrid or in a remote working environment. And the challenges that poses from a security perspective, from a collaboration perspective, will need to be worked through. At Infosys and working with a lot of our clients, we've created a number of platforms that allow for better digital engagement. Indeed, I would have been in Charlotte speaking to you in person, but I do believe that even though this is not as immersive an experience, at least it allows me from London to engage with you in two-way communication, very seamlessly. Uh, from an organizational perspective, again, we've seen a huge move towards agile organizations, towards shrinking hierarchies, and I believe that this will continue. A lot of the digital agenda and the cost saving agenda also requires business and tech and ops to work seamlessly, right? Like almost in a platform economy where you don't have this segregation or silos. Another significant piece in the organizational imperative is the focus on learnability. Technology is changing so quickly, business models are changing so quickly that not investing in your employees and not giving them the tools they need to learn is almost criminal in my mind. Historically, as I mentioned, as a company, we've been investing 2 to 3% of our top line on training people. And historically, this had taken the shape of creating large university campus style infrastructure where we'd be able to train 10, 15,000 people at a time. That still continues. We're building out the US's largest corporate university, which we've just opened in Indianapolis, which will have the ability to train, 3,000 people at a time. But in addition to the physical infrastructure, there's also a very powerful digital infrastructure that needs to be created to allow us to train people at scale, and then inject a huge amount of technology to gamify this, to simplify this, to make learning bite-sized. I think this is an important theme in organizational transformation. We've spoken about ESG and sustainability. This is a key imperative for banks and for insurers specifically. The need to get carbon neutral, not just for your own operations, but also for the larger balance sheet, which is funding clients, which is funding companies. how do you become carbon neutral and meet or indeed beat the Paris goals, I think is going to be a key theme in financial services. And again, there's the opportunity for financial services to lead this transition to a low carbon economy. Again, these are very broad themes. I realize that that I've been talking about, but in my view, this is a significant opportunity for the financial services industry to play a critical role, which indeed it will in the post-pandemic world. The challenges that we saw in 2008 and 2009 largely had to do with capital requirements, with liquidity requirements. I believe that our financial institutions globally are very strong now from a capital and a liquidity perspective. The challenge really is to embrace digital while simplifying organization structures, putting an emphasis on learning, putting an emphasis on being able to work in a remote and a hybrid environment, and using the organizational and the digital pieces to reduce the cost of operations for the end consumer, and making organizations therefore much more resilient to future crises. So that, in a nutshell, is the theme that we're seeing globally. And now, I will pass it back to you, and would love to have a discussion around this or other things.
Terrific. Thanks, Mohit. Very, very illuminating as always. And hope to see you back in Charlotte. The restaurant scene has only improved here, so hope we'll get together and have another nice dinner whenever your schedule permits. But I'm going to open the Q&A box, and for folks in the audience, please chime in with your questions. And until I'm able to get a Q&A queue going, why don't I kick off with a couple of questions for you, Mohit. So the Australian Open is going on. I'm a huge tennis fan, and many in the Charlotte community are. And so we see Infosys on TV. Can you elaborate a little bit more what Infosys is doing in the tennis arena?
Sure, Rajneesh. Look, I think tennis is a fascinating game. We're all big fans of tennis, and a couple of years ago, we realized that there was this opportunity for us to partner with tennis organizations across the world. So we started off with the ATP, and now we're very close partners with the French Open, and now obviously with the Australian Open, right? And so rather than just being sponsors, we realized that there was this opportunity to bring in all the things that we've been talking about, right? The digital experiences, the data element, the AR and VR experiences into tennis. So if I'd love for all of you to go and see what we've created for the Australian Open and previously for the French Open, which is really from three different angles, right? First is from a fan perspective, right? If you're a tennis fan, and Raj, you clearly are a tennis fan, what we've done is we've got 50 or 60 years of data on each and every player in the world, right? So every player, in the past 50 or 60 years, you have data on their performance. So you're able to tell, that at this particular sort of set and this particular game, if the score is 40 love, how does, this player respond, right? Where do they typically hit the ball? What is their win rate or loss rate versus the competition? So from a fan perspective, the ability to delve into data, but also the ability to experience tennis, sort of almost fully, seeing a shot from multiple angles, being able to, if you missed a portion of the game, being able to quickly go and see, what you missed in a very nice visual representation. That is one piece of it. We want to improve the fan experience. The second is the player experience, right? Players are huge customers of ours. And in tennis, like in any game, players are fiercely competitive, right? So when they're facing off against each other, if Nadal is facing Federer, Nadal actually once walked into our booth and asked us for data, right, about his competition. How do they typically, play? Do they serve from? What is their serve like? So being able to provide that rich data to players and to their coaches to improve their game is the second part for us. And the third part is, for the media, right? So if you look at a typical tennis game, if you have a 3-hour tennis game, what we're able to do using, a complex variety of AI techniques is we're able to shrink that game into a 3-minute capsule. So the AI algorithm will identify the most critical portions of the game, right? And create a 3-minute video for you as a journalist. It'll write a script for you on the critical portions of the game, so that you can then, file it at the news desk. Or if you're a journalist and you only want to see the aces that were scored in the match, the video algorithm will be able to pick out only the aces and present it back to you. So our desire to engage with the tennis, with the fan community, with the player community, and with the media has been to allow for these immersive, data-driven experiences. For the Australian Open, for instance, for our clients, we've created this unique hub, right? So you can go in there, you can, because you can't do a physical backstage tour, you can do a virtual backstage tour, which is in 3D. You can see the player stats that I spoke about. You can see the same shot from multiple angles. So it's deeply immersive. And again, we've been looking to see how we can inject technology and the promise of technology so that you can enjoy the game more fully. You can play much more competitively. And if you're a reporter, you can report a lot more effectively.
Terrific. Yeah, I have to say that I've witnessed that firsthand. My family and I were at the ATP World Tour finals in London a couple of years ago, and there Infosys' box was also there, and so I got a chance to have a quick tour. Very, very impressive, the analytics and artificial intelligence capabilities. So thank you for sharing that, Mohit. Another question, and you touched on this during your remarks, but about the green agenda and Infosys, congratulations, you've become carbon neutral 30 years ahead of the Paris Agreement. But how are you looking to support your clients, and what is its importance also for the financial services sector?
Thank you, Raj. Look, I think the focus on the green agenda has been there, at least for the past 10 years. But we've seen an acceleration over the past 2 years for sure. From an Infosys perspective, we were always very conscious about the environmental impact that we had, even before we started measuring it, right? So if you see our campuses across the world, and we had a huge, we have close to 60 million square feet of office space across the world, Raj. So we're a very, very large sort of real estate, I would say, owner and a tenant as well. And so, how do we become green with 250,000 employees, with such a huge footprint in terms of office space? So part of the solution was, setting up big solar plants that are dedicated to us, looking at wastewater and recycling very closely, being very mindful of our travel footprint. And so about a year and a half ago, we started actually measuring our carbon footprint across scope 1, 2, and 3 very closely. And by the end of 2020, we were able to report that we were carbon neutral as a company. And carbon neutrality is important because we haven't become carbon neutral by spending millions of dollars in buying offsets, because that is an easier route. We've tried to become carbon neutral where offsets are needed, because we obviously need offsets for travel, we need offsets for some of our buildings. We've tried to do that by engaging with the community. So providing 100,000 plus families, for instance, with more efficient cooking stoves, by promoting renewable energy or biogas in many parts of India. So we've tried to become carbon neutral as a company, through these means, and we are already carbon neutral. What we've tried to do now, what we've been trying to do, is to help our clients, especially in more resource-intensive sectors, like in manufacturing. How do they look at resource intensity? How do they reduce it? How do they embrace the promise of technology for carbon capture? That's been one piece of it. But again, the financial services business, I think, has a key role to play. First, in becoming carbon neutral from their own operations footprint perspective. And that, I sense, will be easier. I sense that many financial institutions will end up becoming carbon neutral for their core operations, maybe in the next 10 to 15 years. But beyond that, right, there are very large balance sheets. There are very large, whether it's, and from an insurer's perspective, whether it's shareholder funds and own funds, becoming carbon neutral across that portfolio is going to be a lot harder. And it's also a question of measurement. But I'm very sort of enthused to see that a lot of organizations like an HSBC or NatWest or in the US have come up with very ambitious plans for meeting the carbon neutrality goals. It's also a huge opportunity, right? Because this transition to a green economy will require a huge amount of financing. And in terms of being able to create, innovative financing structures, in terms of, for instance, linking your lending to or the interest rate to progress made in the green agenda, we've seen a number of creative responses coming across from the financial institutions. So it's got to be a mix of strategy and purpose towards driving towards green. But it is a wonderful opportunity. The transition to a green economy will create huge opportunities in terms of employment uh, and in terms of business opportunities for organizations, including banks and insurers.
Terrific. That's thank you for being such a leader in the space. Couldn't agree more. One other comment that you made was about learning, and so why is the imperative for learning so important now? And again, what is Infosys doing in the space for itself as well as for clients?
Yeah. Thank you, Raj. So look, I think from the very start, our founder, when he used to hire for Infosys, and this is back in the 80s and the 90s, he said that I don't want to focus so much on the skills that people have. I want to focus more on the learnability that they have, right? What is their ability to learn? Because there was a realization even in the 80s and 90s that technology cycles were getting compressed, but they were nowhere as compressed as they are today. If you picked up a skill in the 90s, you would have a reasonable expectation that they would last you for 10 years. And therefore, our focus was on creating, like I said, the campus style infrastructure to train people. Over the past decade, and certainly over the past 5 years, these cycles have gotten compressed very, very quickly. And so we also realized that the old sort of campus infrastructure, go away for a couple of months to learn something, that wasn't working for people. A digital platform was a wonderful way to engage people and to allow them to learn. But historically, on the digital platform for learning, our focus was very much on creating content. It was this old illusion that if you have the right content, then people will want to learn. Didn't work. So you'd have wonderful content, you'd post it on a SharePoint portal, and nobody would really access it. And so we realized the need for learning to be more bite-sized, so it would fit into the cycles of people's lives, right? So if you're on the bus going back to from work to home, that you'll be able to learn for 20 minutes. So we took all of our learning and we broke it into small chunks of 20 minutes or 30 minutes of learning. Taken together, it can be a program that goes through a year. And we wanted people to have the opportunity to learn online and offline, so you can learn even when you aren't connected. Should be And you should have the opportunity to test yourself frequently, because you may have learned something. So let's say you're learning Python, you should have the ability to spin up a Python environment almost on a second screen and test what you just learned 20 minutes ago. So you should be able to gamify learning. I should be able to know if I'm learning as quickly as my colleagues, if I'm learning faster than them. I should get some sort of virtual rewards, for learning effectively. And equally, the system should be able to tell me what are the things I should be learning next. And so we created this very powerful platform that we call Wingspan. And when we created it, we thought that if 50% of the organization used it and learned for maybe 15, 20 minutes a day, it would be a huge success. But there is something to say about creating a digital platform which is sticky. And so now we find that 80% of our employees use this platform for close to 30 minutes a day. More importantly, they use it for an hour on weekends, right? So people really want to learn. And if you create the tools that allow them to learn, they will embrace it, especially if it's interesting, if it's engaging. It was immensely successful. It has been immensely successful. And now a number of our clients, right? So we have 250,000 employees within Infosys, but more than 1 million of our clients' employees now use the digital platform. And again, it's not just the Infosys platform. There are a number of digital platforms available. And I think this is the future of learning. We've now taken it, the need to, in the US, for instance, the need to reskill people, right? People who are coming out from factory jobs, people who are coming out from, other jobs in sectors that are dying, they need to learn these digital skills. So we started an initiative called Reskill and Restart, where you're able to identify your skills, what are the adjacent digital skills that you can learn those digital skills, and then we link you up either to Infosys or to an employer, so that you can find a job that is relevant to the skill that you've learned. So I think it's a very powerful platform. We're going to go through a very significant dislocation in the economy, and the ability to give people, the ability for people to learn, I think will be very important in making this transition.
Yeah, great points. There's a short mantra called train and retain, and that's very true for corporates vis-a-vis their workforces. There's a steady stream of questions here from the audience, Mohit. So I'm going to thematically go through them. But let's start here. It talks about, well, congratulations to Infosys for choosing Charlotte as a key hub. And could you talk a little bit more about Infosys' experience in Charlotte, as well as your plans for growth? So we have at least half a dozen questions. So let's try to see, let's try to cover as many of them as possible. Thank you.
Sure. So look, we've been in Charlotte for 20 plus years, right? And to be candid, the reason we came there first was because there's such a gigantic, banking ecosystem and insurance ecosystem, but also in other industries, right? Other sectors. There was such a big ecosystem coming up in Charlotte that it was very attractive for us. We found a wealth of talent. We also found that for our employees who were not from Charlotte, it was a very attractive place to move. In terms of the cost of housing, in terms of the opportunities, for people to educate their kids, it was a very attractive talent magnet. And over time, like I mentioned, we've grown to where we now have 750 plus people in the area. We're going to be growing again. We're building out a new set of offices in Charlotte. And I have no doubt that as the Charlotte economy sort of, continues to grow and boom, it'll be a very important center for us. In addition to Charlotte, we've also got a very large, 1,000-person center in Raleigh, obviously within North Carolina itself. And so we see Raleigh and Charlotte as sort of two very significant hubs for us in the state, for us to grow. The demand for technology, I think, is going to grow, especially for corporate technology over the next 5 to 10 years. There will be significant secular growth, and Charlotte will be a very key element of our strategy to grow within the US and to grow globally.
That's very heartening to hear, and great judgment in having Charlotte on your radar as a spot. A question about one more congratulatory note from the audience saying it's terrific that you were named one of the best 3 companies to work for in the world. Can you share a little bit more about that, like criteria, process, like how did you achieve that?
Sure. So I think, look, again, because best 3 regarded companies is a hard metric, right? It's not as easy to quantify as maybe financial performance or shareholder returns, which are easier to compute over a long-term period. So it's a mix. It's a mix of how have you performed financially, how have you performed in terms of shareholder returns, but equally, how are you perceived by your employees? So what are your employee ratings? What are your customer ratings? What is your commitment to the ESG agenda? And it goes more broadly to, are you a respected enterprise, right? What is the level of respect that you have? Are you seen as a leader in the innovation space? And so, these are the metrics that we use to figure out the best regarded companies in the world.
Terrific. Just on innovation, building on that, a question has come in around what's your strategy in the startup space? Do you work with VCs? Do you fund startups? Are there special tools or services in the innovation space that Infosys sponsors or partners?
Our engagement, Raj, with startups takes 3 broad forms, right? The first and the most obvious is that if you take the financial services space, for instance, what fintechs and what insurtechs are doing is really transforming the world. Some of the fintechs are actually competing with banks or insurers, but more of them, or most of them, are actually creating new technologies, new platforms, new operational techniques to make banks and insurers, a lot more efficient, or a lot more, a lot better in terms of experience. And so, working with these relatively small companies and taking them to our clients as part of a larger solution is one piece that we do. And whether it's the very large companies like a Finastra or Actimize, or smaller companies like Suede is a RegTech company, and we partner with them. So that's one piece of it. The second piece, as you mentioned, is a corporate venture fund, right? So we have a corporate venture fund which is about $500 million, and we use that money to invest in early stage companies. So we typically do seed to Series A type financing, and as these companies grow, then obviously it's a great opportunity for us to take them to more of our clients. We don't invest in them from a financial perspective. We invest in companies whose technologies we like, and we think that technology will be attractive to our customers as well. So, for instance, in the data space, we invested in Trifacta and Waterline. In the wearable space, we invested in a very exciting company called Zoop, which makes very high quality wearables for high performance athletes. And so that's been the second way in which we've engaged. And the third is, let's not forget that Infosys itself is a huge fount of startups, right? So we have 250,000 employees. We hate it, but every year a couple of them leave to to start their own ventures, right? And so doing that job of incubation, helping them develop the new products, is the third way in which we're engaged with this community. It's a very active, very growing community. And again, I think this pandemic has given such a boost to new company creation across the world has shot up, Raj. And I feel that we're going to be living through a golden age of innovation from small companies over the next couple of years, and we want to play our part in that.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. I'll rattle off two questions, and then we'll see whether we have time for any more. But they may be the last two questions. So one is, I think it's from a student, and we often have students as part of the audience. That's World Affairs Council's mission, global education. So what will the workforce of the future look like in your opinion? And what are some of the skill sets that you believe will be important for students? That's one question. And then the second question is more about the role that Infosys and the corporate sector can play in bridging between government and the business community, because businesses operate digitally, governments mostly operate with an analog mentality. So is there some opportunity to engage and bridge that to drive efficiency and effectiveness?
Yeah, thanks, Raj. So let me take the second question first, right, which is, we are seeing a wave of transformation actually even in government. So governments are embracing the digital agenda, very effectively. And whether it's in Australia or in India, the UK or the US, we are working with many federal and state governments as they're embarked on their own transformational journeys. If I take the example of India, for instance, we were involved in this initiative called the GST, right, which is the a central VAT type tax which is applied. And we work with the government of India to create a platform which allows for this VAT across over 10 million businesses in India, to allow them to upload their invoices and to be taxed effectively. We're working with health schemes across the world as they're looking to to reach out to patients across the world more from a digital perspective. Benefit systems are being revamped across the world. They're typically horrendously complex. And as you want to give a single snapshot to citizens of what their benefits are, there are huge transformation efforts underway globally, and we play our role in this. Obviously, we're engaged with representative bodies across the world. So whether it's the Confederation of Business of British Industry over here in the UK, or it is engagement with the various chambers of commerce in the US. So that's the way in which we typically engage with governments. We also offer up our work to governments on a regular basis. So we take the state of Rhode Island, for instance. We worked with the state of Rhode Island very closely when they were building out their COVID tracing app, and they built out their own COVID tracing app, which was a huge success. We worked with Salesforce, for instance, to build a vaccination platform that is being used by governments across the world. So that's one way for us to engage and to give back. Just a couple of examples, from the US. To your first question on, what is needed to succeed in the future, I think more than anything else, right, it is a risk-taking appetite, it is flexibility, and it's a willingness to learn. The specific skills that you need in terms of numeracy, in terms of, a specific language or a specific financial scale, those are hard to tell when you're talking about timeframes of 40 to 50 years in the future. But flexibility, a willingness to learn, and a willingness to take risks, especially early in your career, right? I think are going to be critical to success.
Yeah, great point. I mean, that's I'm reading a book by Yuval Noah Harari currently, and that's exactly what he says: critical thinking, creativity, communications. That's really the key. So thank you. Let's see. I think maybe I can ask one more question. So a final question is around what kinds of corporate partnerships do you have, and what does Infosys do for community outreach? So I don't know if these questions are kind of asking the same kind of thing, but anyway,
Sure.
maybe a minute on that.
Sure. So in terms of corporate partnerships, look, a lot of our partnerships are obviously with with other software companies, so like with the Google or the Microsoft or with an SAP, or the smaller players like we spoke about, the startups. So that's one sort of corporate partnerships we have. Obviously, we partner with all of our clients because we're a key part of their transformation agenda. And mostly we work with large corporations across the world. So the largest, I'd say 5 to 10,000 companies, across the world. Your second question about what we're doing, to give back to the community. So it takes two shapes. One is a more sort of organized form, right? So we have something called the Infosys Foundation. The Infosys Foundation, gets about 2% of our net profits, and these go back into community and socially responsible projects that are linked to social responsibility. And whether it means helping flood victims in India, or partnering with the largest midday sort of meal schemes in the world, on the US, a focus on on educating teachers. So with the Infosys Foundation USA, for instance, we support the Pathfinders Foundation, which is training thousands of computer science students and teachers across the US. So that is what we do from a formal perspective. And again, from an informal perspective, we encourage our employees to volunteer their own time. And I know that a lot of my colleagues in Charlotte are very active with the social organizations within Charlotte to give back to the community through volunteering, whether it's Habitat for Humanity or through the various initiatives that you have through the World Affairs Council itself.
Great. Well, thank you, Mohit. The World Affairs Council has a couple of trips a year to interesting locations around the world, and the India trip was a big success. And so I know there's a lot of interest. That next time a trip to India is made, if it's at all possible, Tom Friedman made Infosys very famous, or one of the people who made it very famous. Infosys in its own right has earned that, but visit to your beautiful and forward futuristic campus, I think, is something that's high on the list of many of the people who signed up for the India trip under the World Affairs Council banner. So anyway, if and when we will.
Look forward to that, Raj. Look forward to that. And again, if India is too far, we'd welcome you to visit our lovely campuses in Raleigh, in Richardson, in Providence, in Hartford, in Indianapolis, in Scottsdale. So there's plenty to visit within the US itself.
Great point. And thank you for your generosity. With that, my role as a moderator for this really great meeting is over. It's a privilege for me to serve on the World Affairs Council board, and I'll turn it back to LJ, the president, and Wayne Cooper, the chair. Thanks again from me, Mohit.
Thank you, Raj. Great seeing you again.
Same here.
LJ, you're on mute.
LJ, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I just was saying, Mohit, thank you for this very illuminating and educational presentation and conversation. This timing could not be better, and we appreciate taking time to be with us here this evening in London and today in Charlotte. Also, thank you, Rajneesh Bharadwaj, you a great board member. Thank you for doing such an awesome job as a moderator. I'm turning it over now, Mohit, to the board chairman of the World Affairs Council of Charlotte, Wayne Cooper.
Thank you, LJ, and thank you, Mohit. What a great presentation! When I was listening to you, I thought there's got to be so many companies that are facing and going through what you and your company has already successfully addressed. It's got to be a great benefit for them, and it was also great hearing a bit more about your company. Thank you so much for being with us today. I want to give a big.
Thank you for this opportunity.
You're sure welcome. We hope to see you back soon. I want to give a huge thank you to LJ and the staff for continuing to come up with these great topics and speakers. LJ, Charlotte, Jesse, and Noah, thank you. And there's people don't realize how much goes on behind the scenes, how much work goes by to bring on these great programs. Remember, if you aren't a member, please become one. As a member, I was reading earlier this morning, we get the daily chatter, and that comes with your membership. And it's things that I don't read anywhere else. And it's very short, takes 4 or 5 minutes, but it makes your day, I think. If you are a member, think about upgrading your membership. And because memberships and sponsorships is what allows LJ and the staff to put on these great programs. And with that, thank you very much, and I'll turn it back to LJ.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mohit will continue with our Pride reception. We'll go seamlessly, thanks to new technology, into our next program. But once again, thank you for choosing Charlotte. Thank you for being in Charlotte. Thank you for having a great team here. And most of all, thank you for all that you're doing. And thank you for being with us here today for the World Affairs Council's Distinguished Speaker Series. And now, those of you that want to stay on for the Pride reception, just stay on, and the World Affairs Council of Charlotte staff will connect you, and will continue in our Pride reception conversation, which is going to be less structured and even more of a dialogue with Mohit Joshi.